Good morning, loves. Happy Saturday. Happy sunny Saturday. It's a beautiful day here in the country. That sounded like Mr. Rogers, didn't it? I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday, and I hope you're enjoying the nice weather that has finally made its way to us. And whether you're catching this on replay or you're joining me live, or whether it's morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, I just want to thank you for being here. For being here with me this morning. It's been a rough week. It's been a tiring week. We've been living some challenges this week, taking care of a sick little one, and we've spent the past 4-5 days now just living outside our bodies, living in our stress, in our anxiety, in our concern. And now that we are starting to settle back into our bodies, as we're starting to ground ourselves, we're feeling the impacts of this week. We're feeling the toll that they took on us, the tiredness, the exhaustion, the lack of energy. To the point where I thought about looking for a filter this morning to try to hide the tiredness in my face. But then I thought, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to hide the fact that we have been living through something, that we have been living through an experience or a challenge, or something difficult? So we're here today. And I thought, what better day to talk about compassion after the challenges that we've lived this week. So we'll start like we always do every Saturday. We'll start with a prayer. We will use the Shantideva prayer this morning. We'll use an excerpt of it. And then we'll talk about compassion and why I feel it's so important and so essential on our journey to healing and our journey to growth and self-discovery. So wherever you are, if you can, if you're driving or if you're doing something that requires your concentration, please keep your eyes opened, keep your focus where it needs to be. But if you can, in this moment, if you can take a moment to close your eyes, to breathe deeply, to tap into that stillness within you, and extend love and prayer and strength outwards into the world, please do so. There is so much going on in the world. There is so much devastation right now in India with everything that is happening with the new COVID strain. There are so many people that are suffering, that are afraid. So let's just take a moment this morning, no matter where you are in your pain or on your journey, whether you're sitting in grief this morning or in sorrow or in joy and happiness and gratitude. Let's just take a moment to extend some light out to everybody who is suffering right now in the world. So take a moment to close your eyes, breathe in deeply through your nose, and exhale through your nose. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all those who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. And for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings, all beings, all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. Amen. So thank you for being with me here this morning. Let's talk about compassion. Let me start by talking about my journey to compassion and my understanding of it, and how I came to the stories that I share in the book, and how I came to my understanding of what compassion is and why it's so important. This was a few years ago. It was, as I talk about in the book, it was right after I had discovered that my husband, my former husband, had been unfaithful again, and that he had cheated. And we had spent some time in therapy. We had spent some time trying to work our way through it and come to the realization that we couldn't. There was no mending of our relationship that was possible. And And so we had made the decision to divorce, to separate, but we were still living under the same roof. We were waiting for our house to sell so that we could both move on and go down our own paths. We were still living in tight quarters, seeing each other every day, all day. I was still driving him to work and picking him up from work every day, because I was the only one with a vehicle and a driver's license. So we were still, despite our desire to separate, despite our desire to go down separate paths, and put distance and space between us, we were still very much a part of each other's lives. We were still very much intertwined in all of our day-to-day activities, which put a lot of strain on us and a lot of strain on our relationship and our living environment in general. And it created this anger within me. It created this rage, this frustration, because I would look at him every day, and the decision that we had made to separate, to go our own ways, to go down our own paths, seemed to have liberated him. He seemed freer. He seemed lighter. He seemed more joyful, like a load had been taken off of his shoulders. And it angered me so much, because throughout all of our marriage, throughout all of our relationship together, I had always been the faithful one. I had always been the loyal one, the trusting one. I had never strayed. I had never done anything to hurt him or to hurt our relationship. I had always been the one trying to mend things and to keep things together and to glue our relationship back together and make it work. So it was just so incredibly upsetting for me to see that after everything that had transpired, after the amount of pain that he had caused me, after the turmoil he had brought into our lives, our home, our relationship, our marriage, that here he was, freer than ever, happier than ever, lighter than ever, and I was carrying all of this burden. I was carrying all of this weight, all of this resentment, all of this anger. And it was around this time that I started doing a lot of self-help and self-development work, and reading a lot of different books, listening to podcasts, watching videos of seminars and different speakers and teachers. And during this time, I came upon the work of Glennon Doyle, who I absolutely adore. And she, in one of her talks, I was watching this YouTube video one night as I lay in bed, watching videos on my iPad. And I remember watching this video where she talked about easy buttons. And the concept was, I think all of us have seen them at, the home improvement stores and sorry, not the home improvement stores, the office supply stores like Staples, those big red easy buttons that you would press on and suddenly everything is better and everything is fine and everything is good. And she was talking about the concept of easy buttons and how we have these easy buttons in our lives that we press on to escape ourselves, to take ourselves out of our pain, out of our sorrow, out of our anxiety, out of our grief. They allow us to evacuate our bodies, to evacuate our emotions. And we do this through different ways. We do it through smoking, through drugs, through alcohol, through different forms of addiction of sex and food, and shopping, and all kinds of different obsessive behaviors that allow us to numb ourselves and numb the pain and numb the anxiety and numb the sorrow and the grief. And it was during this time that I started to look at my own life and started to ask myself, what were my easy buttons? What were the ways that I was choosing to escape my pain, to escape my anger, instead of processing it and feeling it and trying to get to the root of it so that I could move beyond it and heal from it. And it didn't take a lot of work to realize what those were. All of the obvious ones were right off for me. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. I had always been faithful, so I hadn't been promiscuous. I hadn't done any of these seemingly obvious things to escape my anger and to escape my emotions and to escape and to exit my body. But what I did realize was that there was this cycle, this pattern that I was living, that was my easy button. when I was going through my grief and through my anger, through these difficult moments of waiting for our home to sell so that we could finally separate and put the distance between us that needed to be there so that we could heal and we could move on. The anxiety and the anger that I was feeling, I would ride the wave by starving myself. I would deprive myself of food. I would go for days just binge watching television alone in our basement on the couch. Not leaving, not going, not seeing anybody in the outside world, not nourishing myself, not feeding myself, just lying there, just binge watching, distracting myself, escaping through television, through binge watching Netflix and different shows, until I couldn't bear it anymore, until I couldn't bear the hunger within me, until I couldn't bear the sorrow and the solitude, until I couldn't look at the TV anymore. And then I would move on to a second phase of the cycle. I would binge eat, and I would eat until I was no longer hungry. I would eat as if I was trying to fill a void that could not be filled. I would eat my emotions, I would eat my stress, I would eat my anger, until I felt so disgusted with myself, until I felt so horrible about what I had been doing to my body, that I would start working out obsessively, 6-7 times a week, or 6-7 days a week, twice a day, hours each session. I would go to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning before work, get a few hours in of weight training and cardio before I would go to work and do my 8-hour shift. And then after work, I would come back home, grab my gym bag, would head back, do a spinning class, do yoga classes, so that I wasn't living at home. I was trying to be there as little as possible. I was trying to spend as little time as possible in my life, just numbing the pain, numbing the anger, numbing all of the frustration and anxiety until my body couldn't take it anymore. And then I would start the cycle over. I would retreat back to the basement and binge watch television, starving myself again, not eating, not seeing anyone, canceling all of my social plans and social engagements so that I wouldn't have to step into the outside world, until I couldn't starve myself anymore, until I couldn't take the hunger. And then I would go back into the same cycle of binge eating, and then working out and exercising obsessively and doing these things that would allow me to escape my body, and that they would allow me to escape the life that I was living and the reality that I very much didn't want to be a part of. So these cycles, these easy buttons, these patterns became very, very obvious to me as I was going through this and as I was reflecting on all of this. And for a moment, it made me ask myself, what were his easy buttons? My ex-husband, even though we didn't have the type of relationship where we could discuss these types of things, where we could go into these types of conversations, where we could talk about our feelings and our emotions and our deepest thoughts and the things we were struggling with. These were not conversations that we were able to have, but I asked myself, what were his easy buttons? What were the things that he was using to escape his body, to escape his pain, to escape his anger and his sorrow and his frustration and his grief, whatever they may be. They could be things from, his childhood or from previous relationships that he had been carrying, burdens that he had been bringing with him into our relationship and into our marriage. And it became very clear to me that the way he had been acting, the lying, the infidelity, the sneaking around, these were his easy buttons. These moments where he would go out, looking for somebody else to be intimate with, even though he knew it was wrong, even though he knew that there was a chance that he would get caught, that danger, that excitement to it would light up his adrenals. They would give him that fix of dopamine, and those were his easy buttons. And the problem with easy buttons is that the more we use them, the more we need them. Every single time we hit those easy buttons, every time we reach for those hits of dopamine, the pleasure, the satisfaction, the release that they give us lasts less and less. So every time we reach for them, every time we rely on them, it just means that we are shortening the distance of time between the current hit and the next one that we're going to need and that we're going to crave, which was causing, all of this turmoil in our marriage and in our relationship. And I remember in that moment, it was the first time that I looked at my former husband as somebody who was possibly in pain, who was possibly suffering. And whether he was or whether he wasn't, whether he had the awareness that he was or wasn't, was irrelevant. It wasn't part. His understanding of where he was on his journey was not relevant to where I was on mine. My journey of healing and my journey of forgiveness, and we'll talk about forgiveness in another light session because it's such a big topic of forgiveness and boundaries that we do need to spend some time on it. But compassion is really the first step to that. It's really the first piece. That journey, we don't need to go on it together is what I'm saying. While we are all on a journey of self-discovery and self-actualization and of healing and awakening, we don't necessarily need to take this journey together. Where somebody else is on their journey versus where we are in ours is irrelevant. We don't need to get to the same conclusions at the same time, or even if ever. We don't know what everybody's soul contract is, why they're here on this earth in this incarnation. We don't know what their plan for self-actualization, for evolution, for expansion is. It might not be for them to get there in this lifetime. So where they are is irrelevant, and where he was in his journey was irrelevant. But this was the first time that I started to look at him as perhaps somebody who wasn't trying to hurt me, or to destroy our relationship, or to cause me pain, or to be unfaithful, or to deliberately go out of his way and bring chaos into our marriage and our home environment, but instead as somebody who was perhaps suffering, somebody who was reaching for that easy button, somebody who was reaching for those hits of dopamine to try to navigate their own internal struggle. And in that moment, in that realization of the fact that he might be suffering, I softened. There was an opening in my heart. Light crept in. And it wasn't that I forgave him. It wasn't that it made everything that he was doing okay. It wasn't that I was, condoning his behavior or trying to validate his suffering. But what it did do was it allowed me to release the burden that I had been carrying. Because for so long, I felt like I had to hold this anger against him. I had to hold this resentment against him. Because if I didn't, if I were to let it go, if I were to be compassionate towards him, it would let him off the hook. And if I wasn't holding him accountable for his actions, then who was? But by doing so, I put this immense burden on myself, this immense burden that I did not need to carry. This wasn't my burden to carry. And instead, I started to ask myself, how could I be more compassionate towards him? Where was I lacking compassion? And the idea was, at moments, completely unfathomable. There were moments where I would ask myself, how could I be more compassionate and more understanding towards him? And then there were moments where I was like, how could I even consider asking myself this question? After everything he has done, after all of the pain and suffering he has caused, how could I even for a second think that he was deserving of my compassion? And let's talk for a second about what compassion is. In its simplest form, compassion is empathy, it's love, it's kindness. It's the understanding, or the assumption, perhaps assumption is a better word, the assumption that someone is doing the best they can with what they're going through, with what they're struggling with the pain that they're feeling, the sorrow, the grief, with the tools that they have available to them, depending on their upbringing, their religious beliefs, their spiritual beliefs, the tools that they've accumulated over the years through lived experience of how to manage their pain, manage their suffering, manage their grief. It's just this assumption that we're all doing the best we can. we're all just trying to make it from one moment to the next, trying to survive our pain, trying to survive our grief, trying to survive our anxiety, and creating as little debris as possible along the way. And it's not always possible, right? If we don't have the right tools, if we don't have the right upbringing, the right spiritual or the right faith that we can, or belief that we can lean on our spirituality for support and for strength and for guidance. Without all of those tools, the amount of destruction and chaos that we leave along our path to navigating this pain and suffering just continues to grow and to multiply. So compassion is really just that. It's just the assumption that we're all suffering, we're all hurting, we're all in pain, we're all dealing with our own crap, and we are just trying to get from one moment to the next, doing the best that we can. And so in these moments where, you know, I would look at the amount of anger that I was carrying, the amount of resentment that I was carrying, and ask myself, where am I lacking compassion? I would start to ask myself, one, not only was he deserving of my compassion or my kindness or my love, but if perhaps the reason why I felt he wasn't worthy of it, or the reason that I felt he wasn't deserving of compassion, was perhaps precisely the reason why he was, and that he needed it the most. And it was this moment, this thought, that was like what Oprah Winfrey would call an aha moment. It was this moment where my heart expanded, where light came in, where I suddenly started to see him through new eyes. I started to see our life through new eyes. And I started to realize that my compassion didn't dissolve him of his accountability. It didn't dissolve him of the burden of the pain that he had placed upon me or upon our marriage, or the chaos or destruction that he had brought to it, but instead was relieving me of mine. It was relieving me of my burden so that I could move forward, so that I could step into my joy and into my light. And I began this practice of trying to extend compassion to him, you know, as much as I could. And there's a meditation that I share in the book that brings us a little bit through, you know, that process of how we extend compassion to others. And I'll talk about it as we get closer to the end. But in those moments, I began to feel a sense of relief, a lightening, like the burdens were being lifted from my shoulders, that I could finally start to see a way through my pain, through my grief. I could start to see the light. I could start to see the future and the possibilities for that future. Whereas before, I was very much consumed by my darkness, by the dark night of the soul, by my pain and my suffering and my grief. And so the reason I want to talk today about compassion and why I feel it is so important is because there is this concept, and I, like I said, we reckon a lot with, you know, the need to extend compassion and love to others, especially when they're individuals who have hurt us or betrayed us in some way. We reckon with that desire and that need to extend that kindness to them because we don't feel that they are deserving of it. But we are all connected. We are all one. We all share the same consciousness. We are all part of star matter or divine energy, however you choose to see it. A Course in Miracles, you know, A Course in Miracles describes our separation from each other as a sunbeam believing it is separate from other sunbeams, or a wave in the ocean believing that it is separate from other waves in the ocean. And this is very much the work of our ego. The work of our ego is designed, or is trying to make us believe in this false ideology that we are separate from each other, that we are not connected, that we are not one. And it's rather duplicitous, because as we judge others, when we deem that they are not worthy of our compassion or of our love, of our kindness, as we place those judgments upon them, we are not only further separating ourselves from them, we're not only anchoring ourselves in the belief that we are separate from each other, but we are also placing that judgment upon ourselves. So this works very much to the advantage of the ego, because the fact that we are all connected, the fact that we are all one, that judgment, that desire to withhold love from someone only means that in that moment when I am judging you, I'm actually judging myself. In that moment when I am withholding love and compassion and kindness from you, it means I am withholding love and compassion and kindness from myself, because we are all connected and we are all one. So when we choose to buy into this belief, into these ideologies of the ego, the impact is twofold. We are further strengthening our belief and the ego's hold on us that we are separate from each other, and we are passing further judgment upon ourselves and depriving ourselves of exactly what we need to move forward and to heal and to bring light and love and compassion into our lives. And that's why compassion is so important, because whatever we choose to deprive someone else of, we are depriving ourselves of. And it's not only compassion for others that's important. It's also compassion for ourselves, kindness for ourselves, love for ourselves. Like I said at the beginning, we've been living a very challenging week. And it's just been a challenging week at the end of a challenging month, and at the end of a challenging quarter. There's been just lots of little trials and tribulations that have been further adding to our stress and our grief and our anxiety and our pain. And in these moments, self-compassion is so important, because there are so many things we could be doing. We could be meditating more, we could be eating better, we could be taking better care of ourselves, trying to sleep better. And we aren't necessarily doing that. We are trying to survive our anxiety. We are trying to survive our concern and our stress. And so extending compassion to ourselves in these moments of just this, we are doing right now the best we can in this moment. We are doing the best we can with what we are living and with the tools that we have available to us. And extending that compassion to ourselves, extending that kindness to ourselves, that love to ourselves, means that I will have more of it to extend to others who are in pain, who are suffering, who are going through grief. The more that I can extend compassion to myself, in my moments of need, in my moments of struggle, in my moments of darkness, the more that I will be able to recognize the pain of someone else, the struggle of someone else, and extend compassion to them, whether or not they realize that they are whether they realize that they are in that struggle or in that pain, or in that cycle of reaching for easy buttons. Whether they realize it or not is of very little concern. Whether they are ready to receive my compassion or my love or my kindness is of little concern. What's important is that I am ready to extend it, that I am ready to give it freely, because love and compassion is abundant. It is non-exhaustive. It is without end. There is no limit to the amount of compassion and love that we can extend or bestow upon ourselves or others. So whether they are ready to receive it or not, whether they are aware of the fact that they need it or not, is of no concern. What's important is that we are ready to give it freely, that we are moving out of judgment, that we are moving out of that reckoning, that need to, justify whether or not they are deserving of it or worthy of it, but instead just giving it freely. So how do we do it? We talked about recognizing the easy buttons. We talked about recognizing them not only in others, but within ourselves, the patterns that we go into, and how recognizing those easy buttons creates this opening. It creates this moment of expansion where our hearts can open, where we can soften, where we can let light in. And that doesn't mean we are letting the person back in. Boundaries are still very important, and we are going to talk a lot about boundaries because I have a lot of strong feelings about boundaries. But it's just this opportunity to soften, to get in touch with our humanity. All of these judgments that we pass on others, what they do in essence is they strip us of our humanity. They strip us of the love and compassion and kindness that is free-flowing and available to us. So acknowledging those moments, choosing to step into our compassion, creating that opening, creating that expansion, creating that softness allows us to lean into our humanity, to reclaim it, to reclaim our light, to reclaim our divine essence. And the way we can practice this, the way we can practice extending compassion to others, even though it might be hard, even though you can be in so much pain and so much grief over the hurt that someone has caused you, that it can feel inconceivable to even imagine it. And if that's where you are, if that act or that gesture of extending compassion and kindness towards someone feels inconceivable, my recommendation to you, my ask of you, is that you pray on it. That you pray to whatever higher power or spiritual belief structure and system you have for yourself. The semantics of it are not important, but that you pray and that you acknowledge that I recognize that I am in need of extending compassion. I recognize that I am withholding love, that I am withholding kindness. And while I don't feel ready to extend that kindness, I am asking for relief. I am asking to be shown the next steps. I am asking to be guided so that I can get there, so that I can get closer to that moment where I feel like I can actually extend compassion and kindness to someone else. And then I'll walk you quickly through the meditation that we have in the book. And there's also an audio version, a digital version of this meditation that's also available on the website. There's a meditation album that includes all of the digital versions of the meditations with beautiful background music to help guide you on your practices. But what we do in essence is we get into meditation. We get into those moments of stillness where we feel connected to a higher power, to the universe, to our higher self, to our guides, whatever it might be for you, whatever resonates, whatever allows you to reach that level of peace and stillness within yourself. And then envision someone that you love, someone that you care deeply, deeply, deeply for. It could be a family member, it could be a mother or father or a child, a brother or sister, it could be a friend, anybody that you feel strongly connected to, that you feel this deep sense of love and gratitude and compassion for. And while you're sitting in your meditation, while you're sitting with the visual of that person before you, this person that you love so deeply, fuel your love, your compassion for that person, your kindness, your empathy into a cloak, into a blanket that you can drape over their shoulders. This blanket that is luminous, that is just made of this golden light. And see yourself wrapping that blanket of love and compassion around them. And once you get comfortable with that feeling, once you get comfortable with that visual, bring into your mind's eye the person that you are struggling to extend compassion towards. Bring them into your mind, and it doesn't have to be close. You can keep them at a distance if that feels more comfortable to you. But bring them into your mind, and now practice draping that same cloak, that same blanket of light, of love, of compassion over their shoulders, and letting it envelop them, letting it surround them with love and light and kindness and compassion. And just sit there in that moment, in that stillness, for as long as you can, for as long as feels comfortable, wrapping them in that sense of warmth, in that sense of love and compassion. And bring yourself back to this practice. You can do it several times per day. You can do it daily. You can do it weekly. You can do it however many times you feel is necessary. to cultivate this sense of compassion towards someone who has hurt you or betrayed you or caused you pain. And what I will tell you is that the more you practice this, the more you lean into this compassion, the more you lean into this kindness, the easier it gets. The more you make a practice of this, the more you make a practice of looking beyond your own pain, the more you make it a practice of looking beyond your own grief to the grief and suffering of others, and extending that compassion and kindness towards them, the easier this all becomes. And the easier it becomes, the not necessarily faster, but it becomes almost like a second nature, where in the future, as you're moving through life, as you're moving through these experiences, it doesn't require as much effort. It doesn't require as much practice. You will be able to more freely give love and compassion to others and extend it to others. It'll remove that sense of judgment of whether or not they are truly deserving or worthy of your love and your compassion and your kindness. And the more we can do it, the more we can extend that love and compassion to others, the more we are able to move through our own grief, our own sorrow, our own suffering, the more we are able to heal ourselves. And that's ultimately what this journey is about, really. It's really a journey of self-expansion, of healing, of moving through life, trying to be the best versions of ourselves. And the best version of ourselves doesn't mean, the most accreditations or, it's not a popularity contest. It's not about the amount of awards and trophies and medals you can collect. It's about being the brightest, most, and by bright I mean luminous, version of yourself with the most compassion, the most love, the most kindness, the most grace that you can extend to others. It is about softening. So often when we're going through these hard times, when we're going through these difficult moments in our lives, and we struggle to extend not only compassion to others, but compassion to ourselves, we build these walls around us. We cage our hearts. We close ourselves off to the world. And extending compassion, it allows us to open back up. It allows us to start dismantling the walls that we've built around us. It allows us to start opening up our hearts to others. It allows us to soften, to remove the shields that we've placed around ourselves that we believe will keep us safe, which in essence don't. They only keep us trapped underneath them. So the more we can practice compassion, the more we can awaken it in everyday situations and in all of our relationships, the more we are able to move into this different state of being. I'm not going to say necessarily that it's a higher state of being or that it's, it's an upper level, because I don't believe there are different levels of beings and that, there are some of us that are more elevated than others or above anyone else. I think we're all on our journey in different places. And I don't think that creates any sort of hierarchy of who is above anyone else. It just allows us to move into a different state of being, one that is softer and kinder and more in touch with our humanity. And that's why I encourage you to practice it. I encourage you to look at these situations in your life where you might be relying on easy buttons, where people around you might be relying on easy buttons, and just awaken that awareness within you. And whether or not you believe or you deem that they are worthy or deserving of your kindness or your love or your compassion, give it freely. Give it freely, because that compassion, that love, that kindness, like I said, is without end. It is non-exhaustive. It is abundant. You will not deplete it. You will not deplete your love and kindness and compassion, and by giving it to people that you think might not be worthy of it. It doesn't mean that you will have less to give to those that you do care about or those that you love, or those that you feel for. The more we give it, the more we have to give. The more we give love, compassion, and kindness to ourselves, the more we have to give to others. The more we allow our cup to run over, to overflow, and create all of this overflow that we can extend to the world around us. So I encourage you to go about your day, go about your weekend, and just look around you, look at the relationships around you, the people around you. There are so many of us that are suffering right now through these lockdowns and these pandemics, and with everything that is going on around the world and in India. There is so much love and compassion and kindness that is needed right now. I just encourage you to walk around your world, walk around your environment, your families, your homes, and just extend that love, extend that compassion, extend that kindness out to everyone you encounter. Let every room that you enter be an opportunity to bless it first with love and with light and with kindness, so that everyone can be fueled by that warmth, by that light, by that sense of being held and supported, because you have no idea the difference that it can make in someone's life, just to have that kindness extended to them in a moment of grief or of sorrow or of pain, especially when it's pain that they have caused, and they might perhaps be feeling that they aren't worthy of kindness or love or compassion, that they aren't deserving of it. The fact that we are able to extend it to them anyways, without judgment, without that internal reckoning for whether or not they are worthy of it or should receive it, the fact that we can extend it to them freely can be life-changing. So I encourage you to go about your day, about your weekend, about your life, and just give love freely. There is so much of it, and we need so much of it right now. Give it freely. Give it to everyone you see, and everyone you meet. Just extend that light and that love to them, and just watch it lift you. Watch it lift you out of your own pain, out of your own grief, out of your own sorrow, out of your own suffering. And let it be the next step on your path towards healing. So thank you so much for being here with me this afternoon. I know we went longer today. I had a lot to talk about, but just thank you for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous weekend. And I look forward to being here with you again next Saturday, as we continue our journey through the book, and our journey through healing and through love and through expansion of calling in that light and awakening to the potential that is within us. So thank you so much. Love.